Over 200 civilizations on every inhabited continent tell the same story. A world destroyed by water, a warning before it came, a small group that survived, a new beginning. These cultures had no contact with each other. They were separated by oceans and millennia. They spoke different languages, worshipped different gods, and built different worlds, and they all remembered the same catastrophe. For decades, scholars have dismissed flood myths as universal fiction, stories every culture invents because rivers flood everywhere. That explanation works, until you look at the details, until you realize that Aboriginal Australians tell stories about specific coastlines that vanished under rising seas, and scientists have dated those stories to real events over 7,000 years ago. Until you see that cultures separated by 10,000 miles describe the same sequence: warning, vessel, animals, birds sent to find land, a mountain, a sacrifice, a covenant. The question isn't whether flood stories are common, the question is why they're so specific. In a previous video, we covered the Mesopotamian, Hebrew, Quranic, and Hindu flood traditions in detail. The Sumerian Eridu Genesis, the Atrahasis epic, the Epic of Gilgamesh, Genesis, the Quran's account of Nuh, the Hindu story of Manu and the fish. 6 versions of the same story, each one changing the reason for the flood to match its own theology. But those 6 traditions come from connected civilizations. They share trade routes, migration paths, and overlapping literary traditions. The fact that they tell similar stories can be explained by cultural transmission, stories traveling with people. The real mystery starts when you look at the cultures that had no connection at all. In China, the oldest flood myth describes the hero Yu the Great, who spent 13 years draining floodwaters that covered the land. Yu didn't build a boat, he dug channels and redirected rivers. The Chinese flood isn't survived by floating above the water, it's survived by controlling it. The earliest written versions date to around 300 to 200 BCE, but the oral tradition is far older. In Greece, Zeus sends a flood to destroy humanity for its wickedness. Only Deucalion and Pyrrha survive, warned by Deucalion's father, the Titan Prometheus. They build a chest, not a ship, a chest, and float for 9 days before landing on Mount Parnassus. After the waters recede, they repopulate the earth by throwing stones over their shoulders, which transform into human beings. In Mesoamerica, the Aztec creation myth describes 4 previous worlds, 4 suns, each destroyed by a different catastrophe. The 4th sun was destroyed by a flood that lasted 52 years. The survivors were transformed into fish. The Maya Popol Vuh describes an earlier humanity destroyed by a flood sent by the gods because the first humans failed to worship their creators properly. Among the Cree of North America, a flood covers the earth, and a figure named Wissakedjak sends animals diving into the water to bring up mud. The muskrat succeeds. From that mud, the earth is rebuilt. Among the Hopi, the people are saved from a flood by climbing inside hollow reeds that float on the water. Among the Ojibwe, a great flood cleanses the earth, and only Nanabojo survives on a raft with animals. Every continent, every era, every theological framework, and the same core elements: a world destroyed by water, a warning, a survivor, a new beginning. The conventional explanation is simple. Floods happen everywhere, so flood stories appear everywhere. Independent invention, no mystery required. That explanation held up for a long time. Then scientists went to Australia and discovered that some of these stories aren't myths at all. In 2015, marine geographer Patrick Nunn and linguist Nick Reed published a study in the Australian Geographer that did something no one had attempted at this scale. They collected 21 Aboriginal oral traditions from across Australia's coastline, stories describing times when the sea was far away, when land that is now underwater was dry and inhabited, when the waters rose and never receded. Then they compared each story to the known history of post-glacial sea level rise around Australia. At the end of the last ice age, roughly 20,000 years ago, sea levels were about 120 meters lower than today. As the ice sheets melted, the sea rose, slowly at first, then in faster pulses, until it stabilized at its current level around 7,000 years ago. For each story, Nunn and Reed calculated the minimum depth of water that would need to be removed for the story's geographic details to be literally true. Then cross-referenced that depth against the established curve of sea level rise. The results were extraordinary. The stories corresponded to real coastline changes, dating to between 7,250 and 13,070 years ago. The Kulin peoples around Port Phillip Bay tell of the sea flooding what was once a kangaroo hunting ground. The Yidinji people near Cairns describe a time when they lived on the coast where the Great Barrier Reef now stands, naming specific landmarks that are now underwater. The Nerinjuri describe Kangaroo Island being cut off from the mainland by rising water. In each case, the geographic details match the known bathymetry. These are not vague myths about angry gods and moral punishment. These are geographic descriptions of specific landscape changes that actually happened, preserved in oral tradition for over 7,000 years. Nunn called them potentially some of the oldest accurately dated stories in the world. The idea that oral tradition could preserve genuine historical information across such a time span is controversial, but the geographic specificity of these stories is difficult to explain any other way. And if Aboriginal Australians can preserve accurate memories of coastline changes from 7,000 to 13,000 years ago, then the question becomes, what else might the world's flood stories be remembering? The geological record doesn't support a single global flood, but it does support multiple devastating regional floods, some of which align with the oldest literary traditions. At Shuruppak, the very city where the Sumerian king List places the flood hero Ziusudra, a 60-centimeter layer of water-deposited clay separates two periods of human occupation. It has been radiocarbon dated to approximately 2900 BCE. Similar flood deposits have been found at Uruk and Kish, cities within the same Tigris-Euphrates system. In the flat, low-lying plains of southern Mesopotamia, one of the flattest landscapes on Earth, a catastrophic river flood during spring snowmelt could inundate everything visible in every direction. No high ground, no horizon. For a Sumerian farmer standing in the middle of it, the entire known world had ended. The story he told his grandchildren would describe exactly that: a world destroyed by water, with only a few survivors on a boat. The broader post-glacial context is even more dramatic. Between roughly 15,000 and 7,000 years ago, melting ice sheets raised global sea levels by approximately 120 meters. Coastal settlements worldwide were inundated. River deltas flooded. The Black Sea may have experienced a rapid inundation when Mediterranean water breached the Bosporus Strait, though the scale and suddenness of that event remain debated. A single worldwide flood didn't happen, but thousands of devastating local floods did. Across millennia, across continents, affecting every coastal and riverine civilization that ever existed. And every one of those civilizations would have had a reason to tell the story. So the answer seems clear. Floods happen everywhere. Stories about floods arise everywhere. Independent invention, case closed. Except the details won't cooperate. If these stories arose independently from universal flood experience, the core elements should be similar: warning, water, survival. But the specific details should vary wildly, and many of them do. The Chinese flood is controlled by digging, not survived by floating. The Aztec flood lasts 52 years and turns survivors into fish. The Hopi climb inside hollow reeds. These details are local, specific, and clearly independent. But the Near Eastern cluster tells a different story. The Sumerian, Babylonian, Hebrew, and Greek traditions share a sequence of specific narrative details that generic flood experience doesn't explain. a divine decision to destroy humanity, a single righteous man warned in advance, instructions to build a vessel, animals loaded on board, not just the hero's family, birds sent out to find land, a dove, a raven, the vessel landing on a mountain, a sacrifice offered after the waters recede, a covenant or agreement between the divine and the survivor. That's not "it flooded and someone survived." That's a 7-step narrative sequence shared across cultures that were in contact with each other, and the sequence is too specific to arise from independent flood experience alone. The Near Eastern cluster almost certainly reflects cultural transmission, real stories about real floods, traveling along real trade routes and migration paths, modified by each culture that retold them. And then there's the Hindu tradition, Manu warned by a fish, a boat towed through floodwaters by a rope tied to a horn, animals and sages saved on board, landing on a mountain, Manu's 3 sons, Charma, Sharma, Yapeti, phonetically echoing Noah's Ham, Shem, and Japheth. The parallels have been noted by scholars for centuries. Direct textual transmission has never been proven, but the structural echoes are difficult to dismiss as coincidence. The independent invention explanation works for the broad global pattern. It doesn't work for the specific clusters. Something more is happening, at least in the ancient Near East, and possibly in the Indo-Iranian tradition. The question is what? We gave Grok the complete picture: 200-plus flood traditions, the Near Eastern cluster, the Aboriginal dating evidence, the post-glacial sea level data, the Mesopotamian flood layers, and asked it to weigh the evidence for both positions. Is this shared ancestral memory or independent invention? Grok's verdict: both positions have supporting evidence, but the stronger analytical case is for independent invention, driven by the universal human experience of flooding, with limited secondary contribution from a small number of real, regionally significant flood events that were later mythologized and diffused. In other words, most flood stories arose independently because flooding happens everywhere. But the Near Eastern cluster, Sumerian, Babylonian, Hebrew, Greek, almost certainly reflects cultural transmission of stories rooted in actual catastrophic floods. And Aboriginal Australian traditions may preserve genuine memories of post-glacial sea level rise spanning 7,000 to 13,000 years. Grok identified the strongest argument against a single shared global memory. Flood myths occur among isolated or long-separated peoples with no plausible recent cultural contact. The details diverge sharply, some floods caused by gods fighting, others by human wickedness, others by natural imbalance. Survivors float on logs, reed boats, mountains, or giant gourds. The common core, destruction by water plus survival of a remnant, is precisely what one expects from independent responses to the same environmental reality. And the strongest argument for shared memory within specific clusters: shared motifs, divine decision, righteous survivor, construction of a vessel, preservation of animals, birds as scouts, landing on a mountain, post-flood covenant, appear across Mesopotamian, Hebrew, and Greek traditions in ways that suggest literary or oral diffusion rather than pure coincidence. The most coherent model is mixed. Universal experience supplies the template. Real catastrophic floods, especially in the ancient Near East and along post-glacial coastlines, produce richer, more specific narratives that diffuse along known cultural pathways. A single global ancestral flood memory is unnecessary and poorly evidenced. But clusters of genuine memory, transmitted and transformed over millennia, are real. In a previous video, we made an observation about the Sumerian, Hebrew, Quranic, and Hindu flood stories. Every culture that told this story kept the structure, but changed the reason. If your gods are capricious, the flood is arbitrary. If your god is just, the flood is moral. If your understanding of the cosmos is cyclical, the flood is inevitable. The flood story is a mirror. Every civilization that looked into it saw its own theology reflected back. The global evidence extends that observation further. Over 200 cultures told this story. Some of them were remembering real events, coastlines that vanished, rivers that swallowed cities, a world that was genuinely destroyed by water within living memory. Others were using the flood as a narrative structure to explain why the world is the way it is, why suffering exists, why the old world ended, why the new one began. Both are true, neither cancels the other. The most extraordinary thing about the global flood pattern isn't that it exists. It's that after thousands of years of telling the story and decades of scientific analysis, we still can't fully explain it. The independent invention model accounts for the breadth. The shared memory model accounts for the specificity. Neither alone accounts for both. Over 200 civilizations remembered the same catastrophe, or invented the same one. Either way, they were telling us something about what it means to be human, to live near water, to lose everything, and to survive. What do you think? Does the convergence of flood stories across isolated civilizations point to shared memory, universal experience, or something we haven't considered yet? Tell me in the comments. If you believe ancient knowledge deserves to be told with real evidence and no agenda, subscribe. We read the texts most channels never touch.